Thank you, Senator. We are also privileged to have State Assemblyman Mark Butler with us today, and I'd like to invite him to the podium now. Mark.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murray. Good morning. It's certainly an honor to join you here for today's ceremony. And it takes me back to many such community events that have occurred in the 12-year period since that awful tragedy. Even in our time of mourning for the victims, these ceremonies brought us together in a way that we had never seen before or had not seen for some time. And I thank Herkimer County Community College for giving us this opportunity today. Throughout our nation, we all grappled with various emotions in the days following 9/11. And it's easy to forget some of what we felt then with everything that was happening around us. But you may recall at that time, we didn't know if other attacks were coming and what form they may take. I remember the emotions of that day as unity, determination, and defiance. I also recall the bravery of the New York City police and firefighters who went into those crumbling buildings to save those trapped inside and became themselves victims. And I remember the courage of those on Flight 93 who, in sacrificing themselves to try and take over their hijacked plane, saved hundreds and perhaps thousands of others on the ground. Today, from this vantage point, it strikes me that the terminology of the Twin Towers and their fall brings to mind an almost biblical imagery. When former Mayor Rudy Giuliani read from Ecclesiastes during the 10th anniversary memorial event, there was no more fitting tribute than a return to the simple words of the Bible, words that helped form the foundation upon which this nation was founded. Many of us, as Christians, must be moved to ask, why would a just and merciful Lord allow 3,000 innocent souls to be slaughtered? And what would Jesus say about our need to avenge those deaths? Some, a small minority, were even moved to ask, was this some form of divine punishment, a cosmic sign that somehow America had lost its way? And so we come here today looking to each other for comfort and consolation and for answers. Why did this happen and to what end? Questions, they are easy. Answers are much more difficult and made no easier in this instance by the passage of time. I've told this story before, but I believe it bears repeating. A few years ago, there was a less than memorable movie made that strung several stories together. It was called Love Actually. The theme of the movie is simple enough. Even in our high-tech, fast-paced world, there is still a place for the old-fashioned notion of love. The movie begins with a brief voiceover, which says essentially that when the planes hit the Twin Towers, those trapped inside had cell phone access and knew the fate that probably lay ahead of them. Of the thousands of calls that went out from those towers, the voiceover says, no one called for revenge or for justice. Invariably, there were calls to friends, family, and loved ones expressing a single thought, that of love. In the end, I am left to conclude there are answers we cannot know. We must have faith. And that is what has brought us here today, faith. Faith in the Lord, but also faith in ourselves, and faith that our nation continues to be that bright, shining city on the hill. Yes, not perfect, but a force for good in our world. I thank you for listening, and God bless America.
Thank you, Assemblyman Butler. Congressman Hanna could not be with us, but today he has a representative from his office, Mr. Jacob Avery, who is here to make a presentation on behalf of Congressman Hanna. Jacob? Congressman Hanna has given to the college the flag of the United States of America. Please send our regards to the Congressman. We certainly appreciate his generosity. The events of this past year provided those of us who live and work in the Mohawk Valley with clear reminders of the essential role law enforcement and first responders personally play in the lives of our communities. As Chief Malone said in those very dark days here in our region, the world has come to Herkimer. We are honored to have as our community speaker this morning the Chief of the Herkimer and Mohawk Police Department, Police Chief Joseph Malone.
Morning. It's fitting that we gather here today to remember the people and the events of this day 12 years ago on 9/11/2001. We're here to show our respect to the families and the victims of those events and to ensure that the events that day will not be forgotten. I watched a documentary a few years ago about 9/11, and a part of it was a gentleman who ran a small museum near Ground Zero. His son died in the 9/11 attacks. He was a firefighter, and the elder gentleman that ran the museum was himself a retired firefighter. In his documentary, he states, every person in the world should come here and bring their children so they can witness what happened here today and make sure that the horror that happened here never happens again anywhere in the world. That day, 9/11, was our generation's Pearl Harbor, our generation's day of infamy. And as the Japanese tried to instill fear on the Americans at Pearl Harbor, the terrorists tried to instill fear in us on 9/11. And again, the spirit and the resolve of the American people were only strengthened. For out of the terrorism came heroism. We can all remember pictures of and stories of first responders and of ordinary citizens who, as in the Twin Towers, helped others down the stairs to safety, sometimes at the cost of their own life, or that helped people away from the streets of Ground Zero after they themselves reached safety. We saw the resolve in the people aboard United Flight 93 who tried to overtake the terrorist attackers. And out of the terrorism came patriotism. All of us can recall the sight of the entire Congress, regardless of party, together on the steps of the Capitol, singing God Bless America. The fact that people not only here, but worldwide pause this day to remember the events shows that the events that day were far-reaching, global. Some local residents here knew victims or friends of victims. Some of us knew people who were down there and we couldn't get in contact with them for hours, not knowing how they were. While the events took place far away from us here in the Mohawk Valley, they did affect us. Many of our local first responders answered the call and went to Ground Zero to give assistance. Our local Red Cross volunteers responded to help other people in need. And many of us still to this day know military personnel who are still deployed in the fight on terrorism. And we can't forget the many college students that were here in attendance at that time, many of them from the New York City area, who again did not know the fate of their family, friends, and loved ones for hours. In the days and weeks that followed the events and many ceremonies throughout the valley, we paused to pay respect for the victims and to show our support. And whether you knew anyone who was a victim or a friend or relative of a victim or not, it affected everyone. It polarized the nation. The events of that day did affect us here in the Mohawk Valley. So we here need to make sure that we gather every year to honor those people on that day, our day of infamy, and to ensure that the horror of that day is never forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Malone. Each year we have a student speaker and a faculty speaker, and today we're pleased to have this morning with us Adam Lisser from New York, who is a sophomore in our criminal justice program. Adam is a veteran of the war in Iraq and currently serves with the New York National Guard. Adam, please join us.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. 911. 3 numbers that have changed people's lives forever. These numbers can be a call for help, or they can reflect the feelings burned into a nation. I cannot tell you that I was there, but I can tell you where I was. I was sitting in the library during my 9th year of school. I was zoned out, like most kids, reading when the television was turned on in the library. I remember the surprise, the shock of seeing the World Trade Center burning. At first thought I was in a dream. This wasn't happening. But by the time I picked my sister up from elementary school, I knew I was living in a nightmare. I will never forget the feelings of dread, anger, and sadness that I felt during 9/11. Felt that there was nothing I could do. It was one of the reasons that I've proudly served in the military for so long. And after everything that happened, the attack on the Pentagon, Flight 93, and the Twin Towers, it became premonition for not just me, but for every American. It became more than just a symbol, a motivator for us to remember what this country was founded for. On 9/11, we became the one nation our forefathers had conceived for us. It was in these moments that we, the people, became stronger. The people that got left behind, more than just the survivors, they became symbols of courage and strength. Families became more than just a household. Cities became more than just populations. All peoples came together. Neighbors became families. Though I have to admit, I have not in my time seen a city come together like New York City has. To me, in the wake of all the destruction and mayhem, New York City became more than just a concrete jungle. It became a place for mourners to gather and to cope with the realization of lost innocence. It resonated out a message of unity amongst everyone despite their differences. Religion, politics, and ethnicity were put aside. It did not matter who you were or if you needed help, someone was there. That is the lesson we should take from this tragedy. We as a nation can come together despite any obstacle that is thrown at us. We are a country that has, time and time again, come under fire. However dangerous it might have been, the conflicts that we have seen, we have risen above everything thrown our way. Even now, 12 years after those terrible events, we have remained constantly strong. We gather to remember what was and to honor what is. We preserve. We persevere. Remember, as long as neighbors stand behind neighbor, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. We are Americans. We are survivors. We are the proud, the free, and the brave. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Matt Powers of the College English faculty as our faculty speaker this morning. Matt grew up in the Mohawk Valley and is very involved in community initiatives in our region. I'm pleased to welcome him to the podium this morning. Professor Powers.
Thank you, Dr. Murray, honored guests, faculty, staff, and students. As a student here 12 years ago, I was walking into the RMCC building on my way to my first class. It was about 9 o'clock, and I paused a moment to watch the news on the 3 television screens. In my day, they were on the ground in a wooden cabinet, and much larger, not suspended from the ceiling. It was there I saw the first tower fall. Classes were canceled soon after. I went home. Mom was crying. She cried all day. I went to my room because I didn't know how to make her feel better. I remember playing a video game, but not much more. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. How could I? I was a young adult just spreading my wings. But this was too large, too shocking, had too much gravity. It wasn't until much later that I even began to perceive the monumental cultural shift we witnessed. I don't think my reaction was unusual. It took others much time to digest these events too. There's a poem by Louise Glick titled October that deals with the aftermath of 9/11. It is a haunting poem that is both earthy and cerebral. It is not a rosy poem, nor an uplifting one, but it is quintessential Glick, austere, concise, and grounded. There is one portion that particularly resonates with me, and it occurs at the end of section 4. Quote, "This is the light of autumn. It has turned on us. Surely it is a privilege to approach the end, still believing in something." That day, plumes of acrid smoke rose above the chaos and carnage. Meeting notes, singed at the corners, drifted into Brooklyn on the wind. Ash coated the world in dingy pall. Surely the end had come. Surely this was hell. Surely the world had turned on us. True, there was much to be afraid of and much not to be afraid of, much to value and much to reevaluate, much to cling to and much to let go.